Today, me and Tuck are going to share with you what everyone should know about pruning. You don't want to prune your fruit trees until you see this. Let's go! Proper pruning might be the one thing holding your trees back from consistent fruit production. And pruning can be simple when you start with the basics. It's like learning to read. You don't learn to read by looking at a word or a bunch of words. Instead, you learn letter by letter, and pruning is the same way. Starting with the basics, when it comes to pruning, there are essentially only two kinds of cuts. They are thinning cuts and heading cuts. I'm going to use this branch that I cut. I'm going to push it in the ground. It's going to act as like a mini tree. I'm going to give you an in-depth guide of these two kinds of cuts and show you how and why we use them. Then I'm going to bring you to a real tree and show you how it's actually done. Let's grab our pruners and make some thinning cuts, and I'll go into detail about them. So we're going to do it on this small tree here. It'll make it easy to see. Thinning cuts, like the name implies, are meant to thin out the tree. So what we're doing is removing a whole branch or limb or shoot. This is an example of a thinning cut right here. Here's a branch. I'm going to cut it right where it meets the other branch right here. We're going to leave the collar intact. That helps with the healing process. I'll show you another thinning cut over here. Thinning cut, we're removing this whole branch or limb down to where it's connected to the other one. This wouldn't be a thinning cut right here. This is the other kind of cut I'm going to get into. So this right here isn't a thinning cut, but if I cut back down to here, the collar, this right here is going to be a thinning cut. So again, thinning cuts are meant to thin out the tree. This gives the tree a lot more access to air and to light. Let me take you over to a bigger tree and show you another example of a thinning cut. We don't just want to know what a thinning cut is. We want to know what happens after we make the cut, how it affects the tree, and how it affects the growth pattern. Because pruning is a stimulant. Think about it. If we take a tree that's in dormancy, we cut some of the branches off. When that tree wakes up, the roots are going to be the same size as when it went to sleep, yet it's going to have less tree to support up top. So that's going to stimulate a lot of growth. How we prune a tree will determine where that growth is redistributed. If I was to cut this branch out because it's pointed back to the center of the tree and it's pointed up, this is an apple tree, so I want to remove this one. To make a thinning cut, I would cut it right here. What that would do would redistribute all the growth energy toward the rest of these branches, to the alternate branches. So all the energy that would come up through this branch would go into this branch, and into the other buds. If I was to make the other kind of cut and cut it right here, a lot of the growth energy would be redistributed to these first few buds. So making a thinning cut right here really thins out the tree and redistributes the growth throughout the rest of the existing branches. That would be the same kind of thing if I was to make a big thinning cut back here. If I was to make a big thinning cut here, it would redistribute the growth throughout a lot of the different kinds of branches throughout the tree. You guys might notice the pruners I'm using. These ones are the rotating handle pruners. I love this one. This is my second pair. I still have the ones that I was originally using, but when it comes to pruners, you cannot beat Felco. The all-time greatest brand. I've been using these for such a long period of time. They work fantastic, and there's so many different kinds of pruners. This one I really like because it rotates as you squeeze, and it just makes it more ergonomic and easier to use overall. Grab one of these pruners down at my website, teamgrow.us. Let's get into the second kind of cut, the heading cut. To do that, we'll go back to this branch we're pretending is a small tree. We went into the thinning cuts. If we wanted to do a thinning cut on this branch right here, we would cut it right back here, leaving the collar on. But we're talking about a heading cut now. So in a heading cut, the terminal bud at the end is removed, or just a portion of the branch is removed. So this right here would be a heading cut. This right here would be a heading cut. Anytime we're cutting along this branch that isn't down where it meets the stem here is going to be a heading cut. So there's a few reasons for heading cuts. One is to stiffen the branch. It's also to induce some side branching, and that's kind of the main reason for the heading cut, to stimulate that growth to the side branches. Like we mentioned, pruning is a stimulant, so the growth energy has to go somewhere. If we cut it back here like the thinning, it'll redistribute it throughout the alternative patterns. But if we cut it back here, it'll redistribute the energy to the first few buds and also to the side branches. That's going to really encourage branching, and it's going to help with some of your trees. This is really important for certain kind of trees like apple trees when they're young. Let's move over to the large tree again and get into more about the heading cut. It's important to know what happens when making a heading cut because it severely changes the growth pattern of the tree, and we want to know what happens so that we know in what scenario to actually use this kind of cut. So come right here. So much of the growth pattern of a tree is stored in what's known as this terminal bud right here. So when you have a terminal bud on a branch, like this one right here, this carries all the information to tell the branch kind of how to grow. When you have a terminal bud here, that's called apical dominance, and what that does is it suppresses a lot of the lateral growth along the branch. You'll notice there's not much lateral branching here. So if I were to come in and do a heading cut and remove this terminal bud back down to say here, that's gonna just change the growth because now there's no terminal bud to give the information to send it back. It wants to kind of create a new terminal bud. So what that's going to do is cause these first 3 buds or so to put out a good amount of growth, and then it's also going to encourage more side branching because you don't have that suppression of the lateral buds anymore. When it comes to heading back, this is how you're going to create that side branching, and it's always good to do a lighter heading back than a super heavy heading back, basically meaning it's good to cut the branch back, say a little bit like to here. It's going to be way more dramatic if you want to cut the branch all the way back down to here. So let me give you an example where I did a strong heading back because I had an issue on one of my branches. So if you look right up top there, last year I headed back this branch to here. You can see what happened. The first few buds, this one, and this one, all had a very lot of growth. It stimulated the growth to those sections. It also stimulated some side growth. So what I would want to do this year is I'm just going to come back and do a thinning cut on this branch. And then if I wanted this one to branch out even more on the sides, I would do a light thinning back to about here. Now we remove that terminal bud and the other branches, the side branches are going to start coming out because there's no more suppression of the lateral buds here. So that's when you want to use a heading cut. There's really only those 2 kinds of cuts when it comes to pruning trees in general. So when you're going to use them is super important, and knowing how they affect the tree is going to dictate when you're going to use them. Because for some trees, like apple trees, when it's a larger tree like this, you're essentially only going to be doing, not only, 90% of your cuts are going to be thinning cuts. When we're talking about something like a peach tree, you're going to be doing a lot of heading cuts on a peach tree because it has to do with kind of where the fruit is going to be coming from and what kind of branches. So that's something super important I'm going to get into a future video. Like if you know the 2 things of the different kinds of cuts and then the next thing I'm going to show you in a video, those are basically the only things you need to know for fruiting trees, and then that'll dictate how you prune every tree. I know I said that there's essentially only 2 kinds of cuts, but there's like one other kind. It's basically like an advanced version of a heading cut, almost combined with a thinning cut. This is called a bench cut. Let me show you what it is. So I know I've been redundant with it, but a thinning cut would be cutting the branch back to right here. A heading cut would be if I cut a branch back to here. But what if I took a branch like this and I cut it back to a lateral branch? So if I cut this off and then it cut it back to a lateral branch, that would be a bench cut. So that's kind of a combination. It's like a heading cut, but it's more advanced because the buds right underneath it are actually a branch. So it's a branch underneath it. That's where a lot of the growth is going to be stimulated. Let me bring you over to a spot right here where I did a bench cut in the past. I know I've done a few of them. Like here's one right here. So you'll see this is where I did a bench cut last year. This branch was growing out, I cut it back to a lateral branch, and then it put the growth into this lateral branch over here. So this isn't a great cut because it'll sometimes like put a little too much weight on here. If this gets too heavy, then it could kind of snap where you made the bench cut. So this is the last kind of cut that we're going to really go into. In its simplest kind of understanding, it's basically an advanced form of a heading cut. So you'll notice when I first put this tree in, I pruned it. I have 4 branches going in all different directions, and I made thinning cuts to create that shape that I have right here. Now, what I want is a gap between this tree, and then I want more lateral branches coming out the top. So I'm going to remove these small little branches here so they don't have any growth. I'm going to do a thinning cut, remove that little one there. I'm going to come up and remove this little one on this side. And then I'll leave this one because this is where I want the tree to start branching out from. These branches here, you'll notice they all have their terminal buds on them. If I want to create some lateral branching, I'll do it on this one. What I could do is remove this terminal bud. You don't want to remove more than like a quarter of the branch, or that's going to cause a lot of regrowth. That'll be a strong heading back. So I'll cut it back to say here. Yeah, go to like here. That'll encourage some lateral branching. Another thing you could do to remove some of the what's called the apical dominance, which I mentioned earlier, is you could bend the branches. So if you were to bend the branch like this, that removes some of the dominance of this terminal bud, and that encourages some lateral branching too. So you could put some weights on it or something just like this. That'll encourage some side branching. You'll notice what I did after I planted the tree. I put these clothespins in to get some of the better branch angles, because the branch angles will affect also how the tree produces, whether it produces a bunch of leaves or it produces fruit. So when it comes to apple trees, you want about a 60-degree branch angle. So that's why I have these in, to create good branch angles. So you don't have to necessarily only prune trees in order to develop certain growth patterns that you want. Just training a tree could help with that as well. Trying to make some cuts over here, and Tuck's digging, looking for some carrots. He knows he smells them. It looks like he found a pretty good one. This guy's always looking for his snacks. If you love seeing Tuck in the videos, spam some hearts down low for the little boss. We'll let him go at it until he finds his way to pull it up. Maybe I'll help him just a little bit. He's getting tied up on the strings. I'll move it a little more for him. There you go. He'll be able to get it now. Oh yeah, looks like he found a pretty nice one. So this late in the season, there's still some fresh carrots for the little boss out here. He loves his fresh snacks, right boy? He's got a little dirt on his face, that's okay. A little dirt on the carrot. Let me wipe it off a little bit for him. Snap it off, give it to him on this side. Looks like a pretty good one, boy. This guy's got just the nose in the garden for the carrots. Might be late into January, but that doesn't stop him from coming out and grabbing some of his own fresh snacks. Right, boy? That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you got something out of it. Me and Tuck had a blast out here, just showing you guys some of the basics when it comes to pruning. We have a bunch of trees to prune, but we love doing it this time of year. It's just like fun to get out here, not be in a rush, get some pruning done, get some fresh air, and just set up the growth for next year, because pruning makes such a massive difference. It just stimulates growth. It opens up windows of light. It helps get higher quality fruit. So you really need to get out there and prune. There's one other pruning video that's going to tie into this, that's going to just simplify the whole process. So me and Tucker are going to get that out shortly as well. But we just wanted to say thanks for all the continued support from everybody. And thanks for being a part of the team. And if you guys want to grab some merch or something, check it out down low at teamgrow.us. We also wanted to thank one of our new channel members, Elliot Teeters. Thanks for being a part of Team Grow. Thanks for having your hand in everything we're doing out here. We've got some big news coming up, and this year is just going to be insane. Me and Tucker are setting up some really cool ideas, and we're just so excited to be able to bring that to you. So hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share with your friends, and just stay along for the ride, because there's some fun stuff coming down the pike. Tuck and James will be back again real soon. We out.